Last class, if you guys can remember, we went through the lab comparing the specific heat of various materials, and we did a kind of dissected the intro there. The next part of the lab is the procedure. Okay, now the procedure for this lab is kind of short, so what I would like to do with this video is give you a more detailed instructions on what's supposed to happen. The first thing you'll notice when you come into the lab room is that there are different stations set up, and each station has at it one of these tubs with your group's number on it. Inside the tub, you'll find a thermometer. Now, some thermometers are in these plastic cases, others are loose. Either way, be extremely careful with your thermometer. The thermometer can break very easily. The next thing in your case you'll find is some sort of a glove or a mitt to help protect you. You'll also find a pair of tongs in here because we'll be dealing with materials that have been heated. We're going to need those. You're also going to find in here the 3 materials that we will be finding the specific heat of. We have a piece of rubber. This is a rubber stopper. You'll have a block of iron and a block of aluminum. Okay. The next thing at your station, besides the things in the tub, are a triple beam balance. Every group will need one of these. You'll also find a large beaker and a small beaker. And finally, a hot plate, which should be unplugged. And at the end of the lab, when we leave here, it will be unplugged. You must unplug the hot plate at the end of the lab. And all of the materials should be back looking just like this, ready for the next class. On the second page of your lab, you'll find this first data table. And this data table is broken up with 3 materials, material 1, material 2, and material 3. And those are your iron, your aluminum, and your rubber. And so that's where you put the names. The next thing that needs to happen, or one of the things that needs to happen at the beginning, is to get the mass of each material. And this is where our triple beam balance comes in. I won't go through the steps of this because you guys already know how to mass objects, but you'll be getting the mass of all 3 of those. What needs to happen is we need to add heat to these objects. So instead of just putting the objects directly on the hot plate, which could be kind of dangerous, we are actually going to use water. So you're going to take the large beaker and fill it with water. Please be very, very careful because these sinks do have a tendency to splash. Okay, and you'll need enough water so that you're able to submerge all 3 objects. Then we're going to take our beaker with water in it, put it on the hot plate, plug it in, and go ahead and turn this all the way up to high. And you should immediately feel heat coming off it. Be very, very careful. It does get very hot. Okay, so we're going to let this heat up. I would say time it for about a minute. So wait for it to heat up for 1 minute. After 1 minute, place the first material carefully into the water, and you may want to use the tongs for that. And once it's in the water, you're going to give it 5 minutes to soak up as much energy as possible. Okay, so 5 minutes. The next thing you'll need to do, according to the directions, is measure out 100 grams of water for each substance. Now, the cool thing about the metric system is 100 grams of water is the same as 100 milliliters. So just measure out 100 milliliters of water into the small beaker. You'll use a thermometer to measure the initial temperature of that 100 milliliters or 100 grams of water. This is taken in degrees Celsius. You might have to wait a minute for the temperature to settle so you can get a good reading. And then you record that number here by initial water temperature. Okay, Once I have my initial temperature, I'm going to move the thermometer for a minute. And at this point, my block in here should have soaked up tons of energy from the hot water. And very, very carefully, you're going to bring it out. Now this is hot. I'm going to put it directly into my smaller beaker, and the water should just cover the surface of your block. Then I'm going to return my thermometer, right side up. I'm going to return my thermometer to the water and try to keep it so the thermometer isn't directly touching the block. It's a little tricky. You might have two hands to do this. And I'm going to watch the temperature change on the thermometer. Now it may take like a minute or so for it to reach its final temperature, but whatever the highest it gets to, that's what you're going to want to record. So that is called the final water temperature, and that's what you're recording there. Now here, where it says water temperature change, you're going to take your final, subtract your initial, and you'll get how many degrees the water changed by. Okay. The next thing on the list is specific heat of water, and that's already given you that number. Note that the unit for specific heat is joules per grams times degrees Celsius. The next step says heat gained by the water, which is equal to the specific heat of water times the mass of water times the temperature change of water. So you have to use it's a little multiplication here. So heat gained by the water is equal to specific heat of water times mass times temperature change. Okay. The heat lost by each material is actually the same as the heat gained by water, so whatever you put here, you'll also put here. And then material specific heat is the heat lost divided by the mass of each material. So again, you'll have to do a little bit of math here.